From Hong Kong, Chicago, and the city of Stoke-on-Trent, this is the Classic Lenses Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 83. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by Johnny Sisson and Perry G. Hello, Johnny.
Hello, good morning.
And hello, Perry.
Hello, good evening.
And we have a guest with us. And it's somebody that's been on the show before. I'm not sure if it's technically twice or not, but he's been on the show before. And we have Mike Novak with us. Hello, Mike.
Greetings from Portage, Iowa.
Hello there. Right, we're going to do things slightly differently this week. We're just going to go straight into what we've been up to, and then we'll go into a deep dive into Mike Novak. So you can all visualise that, and let's start off with you, Johnny. You've been up to a few things this week.
I have, well, most notably yesterday. So way back, I guess it was earlier this year, which is now quite a while ago, Mr. Mike Ekman did me a favor, and what he did was he transplanted a lens. I have an old Bessa 1 folding 6x9 camera, and it had a Novar lens on it, which is a fine lens.
It's just 1K short of being a great lens.
It's well done, Mike Novak. Who's sharp as a tack here at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Me and Dunkin' Coffee.
That's right. So so I had a Bessa with an almost Novak lens on it, and I wanted to put I had picked up for like $2 a Scopar lens, so the 105 Scopar, and I was kind of fancying having that thing on this camera, so Mike Ekman did the job for me and transplanted the lens and checked the collimation and all that stuff. So I had this beautiful Scopar lens, my favorite Tessar. Wasn't that a TV show in the 50s? My favorite.
It should have been.
It should have been. So the Scopars are
shot with Tessars anyway. So.
Yeah, they probably were. So the Scopar is my favorite of all the Tessar kind of clones. So I have this thing transplanted on here, and I had really never shot the camera, and I really had been itching to shoot some 6.9. So yesterday I did a little Sunday road trip, not a very long road trip, about a half hour away, but to a place oddly enough I had never been to, and that place is the Chicago Portage National Historic Site. So basically, long story short, it's the place where they realized that they could get all the way down the St. Lawrence River, all the way through the Great Lakes, all the way to the bottom corner of Lake Michigan. And then they could go down a little stream, and then that stream ended. And then they realized that if they carried their canoes a very short distance, they would be in the Des Plaines River, and that runs into the Mississippi River. So now they figured out how to basically get from New York or the East Coast all the way to New Orleans, and then kind of opened up the Western U.S. So it's a place of rather important. Basically, it's the reason there's a Chicago is because of this Portage. So I had never been there, and really just wanted to walk around, get out in the nature thing, and take some pictures. So I shot a bunch with this Bessa 1, and I'm gonna develop that film later today. And I'm excited to see it, because if it works out, this would be, I mean, it folds down to literally, if you have a big pocket, it would fit in that pocket. So I'm excited to see how this looks. And then I have another kind of project going on where I'm gonna, I think, pick up a otherwise not completely functional Bessa 1, and I'm gonna transplant onto it a wide angle lens, so I can do wide angle pano 6x9, et cetera. So I'm gonna build that out on the Bessa chassis.
Building a better Bessa.
Yeah. So that's sort of my big highlight of my photographic week. But there was another highlight, which was just a week ago, Mike Novak?
Just a mere week ago today.
So we're So we're gonna talk about that too, but we'll wait to get into the Novak visit. So that's my big highlight. Okay. On to Perry.
Okay, Perry. So how about you?
Yeah, I've been up to a bit. I'm really glad we have Mike here because, like, for once, I'm gonna not be the gassiest person on this this podcast. But I've been shooting a bit. I picked up a little bit of stuff, so I finally rounded out my collection with a beautiful Leica M4.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was listed for a really good price, and a whole bunch of people went after it. But the guy sold it to me because, and I didn't know this at the time. When we met up, he was like, "I know you. We've spoken before."
Your fame preceded you.
Well, apparently. So this is my first encounter with a listener. So that was cool. It's in beautiful shape. Got it for a great price. And then this thing is like, it's nicer than, I thought it was just an M6 without a meter. It's nicer than the M6. I'm just gonna admit that.
Yeah, he said it. I heard it just then.
The M4 was my first Leica.
It really is. It doesn't have the 75 millimeter frame line. It doesn't have the stupid Leica logo.
Yeah. Doesn't have a stupid light meter.
It doesn't have a light meter. Yeah. Even though it has that like plastic thing on the film advance, it's a slightly different shape.
Yeah.
So it feels a little bit more refined than the M6, which does feel, I jokingly told Johnny that the M6 was the working man's Leica because there was none of this luxury stuff, right?
Yeah, it sounds like you've been a bit of an apologist though for that wine. That it's just not the same as an M2 or I guess an M3 though, is it?
No. I mean, for sure. Like I have an M2 and an M3, and they're way nicer. But the M4 has the quick load, which saves me quite a bit of time in the field, and the rewind, which I don't really like. The sort of diagonal rewind that the M4
I like the diagonal rewind.
It feels nicer on this M4 than it does on my M6. I find that when I'm using my M6 and I'm rewinding it, my fingers slip a lot, and when you lose grip of it, it just starts spinning backwards, right? Whereas on an M2 or an M3, like it never spins backwards. But this M4, it has like a little metal knurled tip, so it's a little easier to grip, and I find that I don't lose grip of it as much as I do on the M6.
So could you, I don't know how easy this will be to do, but could you explain the difference in the loading, this quick load? Because I've heard about, I think M actually has got either an M2 or an M3 with a conversion. So what is this quick load?
Well, I mean, on an M2 and M3, there's a spool that you remove from the camera. And then you have to shove the film leader into the spool and then line it up and stick it back in. I mean, it's not that bad. It's once you get used to it, it's totally fine. The part that takes me time is actually getting the leader into the spool, because you have to like pull up that little clip thing. Whereas on the M4, M6, etc., basically there's like 3 teeth in the bottom of the camera. You don't have to take anything out, and you just line up the film leader and you just slot it in the middle, and then it just catches by itself.
All right. Okay,
yeah, so it takes
that sounds better.
3 seconds. Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, that's the one thing that it has going over the M2. So it's very nice. It looks nice. I had to get a lens for it. So like,
because your other
of course you did.
Yeah.
That goes without saying.
I mean, I need a lens that's the same color. So I got a. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. That's what this podcast is for. No. It's actually a really happy story because there's a shop in Hong Kong called Sunrise Photo that I've mentioned before. They have just all kinds of cool exotic stuff. And they've been in business for 30 years. 15% of all their profits goes to animal charities because the owner's a big cat lover, and he's got like a cat who sits on the like on the counter all day at the shop. But they were supposed to go out of business in September because their rent got jacked up. But the outpouring of support that he got after making that announcement was so huge that they're, and I think the rent might have gone down because he's in a neighborhood where there's like a lot of police violence and like rioting. So they canceled the going out of business notice, and they're still going.
Wow.
You mentioned him on a previous podcast, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So he announced about a week ago that they're staying in business. They were going to close in September. And it's September now. So I went to pay him a visit and thought I would support the shop by picking up a lens that he had stocked recently. So I just picked up a beautiful condition Chiyoko 5cm f2 Super Rocore in LTM. And specifically an uncoated version, which I have then taken with a few rolls of Cinestill to shoot. And just two quick things about this lens before I hand over. Number one, I've always been nervous about shooting uncoated, like shooting color film, especially Cinestill with uncoated lenses. I don't know why. I think it's just that sense that coating makes everything better. But the results are really nice. Like I really, really like the way that stuff looks with this lens. It's surprisingly good wide open as well. But the other thing is I figured out why the Chiyoko LTM lenses have a lot more of that kind of swirly look in the bokeh compared to some other lenses. And it's because on the Minolta A mount or the Minolta 3 rangefinder series that they were originally attached to, the negatives, even though they use 35 millimeter film, the negatives were 32 by 24 and not 36 by 24. And so the image circle, even though it covers the full negative, no problem, the lens is designed for a very, very slightly smaller image circle. And so you get a lot more of that sort of edge aberration, which looks really cool
at
night.
Is that the same size negative on the old robots?
No, the robot's half frame, right?
That's square. Yeah, it's just it's actual square. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think if I'm not wrong, the first weren't the first Nikon rangefinders that same aspect ratio. I'm pretty
32
sure.
32 by 24.
Yeah.
I don't know. Possibly.
Or they were. Oh no, they were 20. They were like 24 by 32. It was a more rectangular than 35 millimeters. So that's a bit bigger. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a slightly smaller image circle that the lens is designed for. So it looks super cool.
That makes sense.
So I mean, just quickly on the robot, I think Mike, the 4-centimeter Biotar. The original camera that's made for is half frame, but it will just about cover a full frame, I think.
I was very tempted to buy the nice robot that they had the display case at Central Camera last weekend.
Oh, yeah, that one.
It was speaking to me, but man, just couldn't do it. Just couldn't. I don't know if I could have packed another thing in my suitcase for the trip.
It's a heavy little beast, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's like just a lump.
Yeah, the same shop I got this Chiyoko from had a robot 40 millimeter Biotar converted to LTM mount with rangefinder coupling. I was so tempted to pick that up for my Leica CL, but I got this instead. Yeah. So that's my week. I did go out and shoot a couple of protests. Did not get tear gassed, so that record is still going.
And you didn't get blued.
I did not get blued. With the blue dye that the cops were shooting out of the water cannons. So happy times. You know, actually accidentally ended up in a protest because I actually went out for lunch. And then all of the they shut down like all the public transit in the area. And then I was like, well, I guess I have to walk to my next destination. And I was like, well, the only way I can walk there is the same way that all these protesters are going. So whatever, I'll just take the same route.
Yeah.
So other than that, Simon, how's your week going?
Well, I've not done a great deal this week, so I think I just want to talk about a couple of things from last week. Really, the first one was we were talking about some of the digitized photos that I'd done and generally messed up. But there was one issue that with regarding the horizon shots where the right hand edge of each shot was almost consistently smudged, and we were wondering if this was something to do with my technique about digitizing, and I was struggling with that. It didn't seem to make a great deal of sense. And then I realised something because, and I meant to actually mention it last week, but I was in a discussion with Dan Goshen about the horizon, and he asked me the question: has he got that little handle that screws in underneath the camera on the left-hand side? So I don't think I mentioned this last week at all. And I said, yeah, it's got that. It's got everything. It's also got these little clip-in filters as well, which are bizarre little things. I had to go onto YouTube, and that didn't help me. I then went on to Buttkiss, not Buttkiss, on his site to try and get a manual that wasn't in Russian. and just about understood how these things go in, and they're quite interesting little things. But you clip them in, but to take one out, you have to use another filter because they've got little hooks on the filters, and you use the hook on the filter to unhook the other one that's already in there. So if you've only got one, then you're in a bit of trouble, really. The other part was I only actually discovered I even had these filters after the event because I just found them tucked inside the handle. So when I looked at it, I thought, oh, you might be able to keep a spare roll of film in there or something like that. Well, actually, no, that's not what it's about. It's about storing these filters when they're not in use. And there's a Y8, a two-stop ND and a UV filter in there, which I didn't realise. I could have really done with the two-stop ND as well, because really topping out at 250th and using 400 ISO film, it's a bit restrictive on those rare bright days that we have here in the UK. So that would have helped me. But the other part to that conversation because I asked Dan about why it even has the handle, because I hadn't actually worked out why it had the handle. It just got one. I thought, well, it's there, might as well use it. It must be there for a reason. And he said it's to keep your hand out of the way of the shot. And then it then, moving forward to our conversation, it dawned on me that I was making no effort the way that I was actually holding the camera on the right-hand side of the camera. So obviously I got my left hand is out of the way, it's underneath the camera, but my right hand is just holding the camera conventionally. So there's a reasonable chance that those smudges on the right-hand side were my fingers gripping the side of the camera.
I love it.
So... and I mean, you look at the design of the camera as well, and I was thinking, why was the shutter buttons in a really odd position? It's not in a particularly ergonomic position. I'm thinking, well, that's just Russian design. They just put it wherever it fits, and you just adapt yourself to use it. But I now realise that it's set further back, so that you can actually, it encourages you to shift your hand out of the way of the front of the camera. So I've actually taken some shots this week with it, and with the Minolta X-Pan from that Hamish Gill has lent to me. So I've been playing around with those two. So at some point I'll have some possibly new improved horizon pictures that I've actually got my right hand out of the way of the shots. Fingers crossed.
Oh.
Not in front of the lens.
Yeah.
If you cross your fingers on the right hand, they will probably stay out of the shot in the future.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so that's one thing that I forgot from last week, and then there's just something that I need to just bring up this week, because I was called out on something that I said on the podcast last week by Andrew Lawson, and that was in our Facebook group. The Classic Lenses podcast Facebook group, not Photography with Classic Lenses, the Classic Lenses podcast Facebook group. And it was regarding some of the observations I was making about large format versus smaller formats, and I almost certainly mentioned perspective and things like that, and it was pointed out to me that perspective doesn't change. It's got nothing to do with sensor size, which I had a bit of a problem with that, and to some degree I still do. But I think that I'm talking more about not necessarily from a technical point of view, but from a user's point of view, which is not necessarily the same thing. But within that discussion, it was mentioned that there were numerous YouTube videos out there, but I couldn't actually find anything specifically on the point I was making about when you stand in the same position with one camera, this say large format, or rather an old photograph that's been taken on large format, and you stand in the same position with a smaller sensor camera. I'm very much of the opinion you're not going to get exactly the same photograph just because you're taking this with the same field of view. And well, that was my general point. And within that discussion, Perry very kindly said that I'm wrong on several occasions, and then he promised to tell me about all of this and post his thesis that he wrote about 10 years ago. But I'm just saying I'm still waiting for that information, Perry.
Okay, so number one, I did engage with this, but in our private like podcast chat.
Which doesn't count.
No, but you did confess that in your test images that you posted, that not only were you standing in the in different positions for the photos, that you had done the focal length conversion incorrectly, so that in fact one lens was in fact wider than the other.
Just going to say that those two shots weren't actually produced as test shots, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wasn't trying to prove a point with those. In fact, one of the shots wasn't even taken by me. It was just two people taking very similar shots in the same location, and ended up with similar but different results.
Yeah. So I have sent you a link, which we can include in the show notes, of an article explaining why perspective is a function of like where you stand and the relative position, the relative distance of objects in the frame to the camera, as opposed to like your field of view. It's not an article that I wrote. You'll see that the credit at the end of it says like the concept of the article was an idea by Perry G, because I was too damn lazy to actually do it. I just told someone else, yo, you should do this to set the record straight, and they did. So well done. But like, secondly, I do think that it's one of those really annoying terms, right? Where Andrew's using it as a technical term, and you're using it in that kind of layman sense. So it's totally understandable. Like technically, perspective is just a function of where you stand in relative distances. But when people talk about wide angle perspective, what they mean is if they want to get the subject the same size in the frame, a wide angle lens forces you to get closer in order to do that. But it's that act of getting closer that changes the perspective and not the field of view that you're shooting with. And so to prove this, all you need to do is stand in the same place with a tripod, shoot with as many different focal lengths, as many different formats as you want, and the relative size of objects and the kind of amount of distortion or whatnot will be the same if you crop everything down to the same field of view.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm still not getting that, but I'm because a lot of what you say there makes sense, and I appreciate that you're using my view of layman being stupid person.
No. It's the same way that, like, you know, I did a degree in philosophy, right? And when people use the term begging the question, they're always using it wrong because it's a technical term that means like presupposing your conclusion and your premises. But people use it to mean like asking or raising the question, and that's totally fine, right? But some people will like get super triggered by like a misuse of a technical term.
A longer focal length lens will pull the background in closer to the subject without changing the perspective, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because you're
standing at
enlarging
an angle to the subject.
Wait, no. So hold on.
I was going to say that you just made my argument there, Mike.
No. So, like, for example, if you're taking a portrait of someone with like mountains in the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you shoot with a wide angle lens, and you want the person to be like the same size in the frame, you end up getting closer to the person. But the wide angle lens with a larger field of view means that the mountain's going to look tiny, right? So when you switch to a longer lens, it's a function of using that smaller field of view.
Yeah.
But then blowing the image up to the same size that magnifies the background, right? But in order to get your subject the same size in the frame and not just have like their nose as the picture, you have to step backwards, right? So the relative distance between you and the mountains changes by like nothing, but the relative distance between you and your subject has like doubled or tripled by that act of walking back.
I think we're all talking about the same thing, but just using different language to get there.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Well, the bit that's, and I'm just going to interject it here, and the bit that I'm coming from is you can stand in the same position with a longer lens, but have more width of view with a large format. That's the point I'm making.
But
I think that has more to do with the size of the image circle, doesn't it?
That's exactly what I'm saying, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just a function of you getting a wider field of view on a larger format, like a larger piece of film.
No, it's not though, because you're getting that's
the perspective doesn't change.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. I think we're talking about perspective, and we're not actually it's quite possible we're not actually talking about perspective at all.
Wait,
Well, that's a different perspective on it.
If we're not talking about perspective when we're talking about perspective, what are we talking about?
Well,
when
it could be you might be talking about perspective. I might be talking about something completely different. Okay, yes. I think we've probably got to the end of this discussion.
Time and relative dimensions in space.
Yeah, that's it's all to do with the Moogle Frugal strata. And so on that note, because it's been a busy week for Mike, I'm going to hand it back to Johnny because and sort of do what we actually did back in April when Mike was on the show, and for two reasons it didn't quite go to plan. The first reason was that nobody could actually hear Mike because he was using a tin can and a taut piece of string across the Atlantic. So to say Mike's voice was very, very thin. It's a shock to us when I first heard him today, because he doesn't sound like a pixie at all, like he did last time. So that's one thing. So as you've heard, Mike's got a proper mic this week, which is really good. The second one is he appeared on a show that was hijacked by it was sort of like round 2 of the ill-judged April Fool that we did back in April, and we had the lovely Em and the lovely Hamish came on the show, but pretty much took the show away from us. So we didn't really get to hear as much about Mike as we'd like to. So I'm going to hand over to Johnny, who can do a proper introduction to the legend that is Mike Novak.
Oh, here he is, folks. The gnome returns.
The prodigal gnome.
The prodigal gnome. He returns. So, let's just start talking about food. Is that okay?
Oh, sure, that's fine. I like food.
No. Simon's thinking I'm going to do a proper introduction.
As long as we're not going to do lobster rolls again, you can go ahead.
No. We have other food items to talk about. There are no lobsters native to the Chicago region, so there are no lobster rolls, therefore, native to the Chicago. Now, there is a place in Chicago that thinks it does a proper lobster roll, and I've been there. Because, if there's a lobster roll, I'm going to try to eat it. And I've eaten most of the lobster rolls that can be had in Chicago. And there's a couple that are okay. But this place that styles itself as like the lobster roll, capital of Chicago or something, they ain't got it. They ain't got it. So anyway, we're not going to talk about lobster rolls. But we will talk about
crabs, right?
No, that's a different. Perry, getting crabs is a different thing. Altogether.
We got crayfish in Chicago.
Yeah, we have a crayfish. Getting crabs is something you don't want to get in Chicago. Trust me.
Most of them come from the tainted water.
Right. Exactly.
Don't eat anything that glows in the dark.
Right. Exactly. So, the other highlight I of my week that I alluded to, in the earlier portion of this podcast was that Mike Novak was in town. He was here in Chicago, and there is a photographic record to be found of this momentous event. And you will see those photos widely throughout the places that we probably all congregate on the Facebook, but certainly in the Classic Lenses podcast Facebook page, you will see many, many photos of that visit to Chicago by Mike Novak. So I guess my introduction would be Mike Novak is a wonderful gnomish man who lives in Iowa, who's from Chicago. As a matter of fact, he is from a place very close to where my mom grew up, like within half a mile?
Yeah, somewhat around there.
Something like that. And then went to the same high schools, I think. And so anyway, Mike's a good guy. Mike's a Chicago guy.
Johnny may very well be my son.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible because we don't know if Mike got an early start, but he might have. So, I think we other than the lovely gnome-like profile that Mike has. I think we know him on the Facebook for his interest in things such as twin lens reflex cameras. Well, Jesus, what does Mike not have? I don't know.
I don't have any panoramic cameras.
Okay, you don't have any panoramic.
Except for the Nikon AF600 in panorama mode.
But you have a lot of other things, and you have a very deep knowledge of these things, and you have a very deep knowledge of expired film and all of that kind of stuff too. So we thought we'd get you back on and talk about all those things, but most importantly, to talk about food in Chicago. And don't think we're not going there, people. That means you, Simon. Mike, do you want to tell us about Gene and Jude's?
Oh God, Gene and Jude's. Gene and Jude's is the best hot dog in the world, and the best French fries. No matter what James Giordano or Michael Patterson, those guys say about Nathan's, it's just not even close.
Yeah, it's the best. It really.
You want to bite into a hot dog that bites back.
That's right. It's got to snap at you.
And James had mentioned that he could buy Vienna beef hot dogs at supermarkets in Southern California. I'd like to set the record a little straight on that, because while you can buy hot dogs made by Vienna beef in Southern California supermarkets, they are not the hot dogs that Vienna beef makes specifically for Gene and Jude's.
Right.
Gene and Jude's dogs are slightly longer, they're tangier, and they have more snap to the casing.
Natural casing, folks.
Yes.
Natural casing is the key.
And their French fries are fried in lard.
Yeah.
Hand cut as you watch them with the same potato cutter they've been using for 60 years. I don't know if they changed the lard in 60 years either, but
yeah.
I've heard a rumor that using ketchup is controversial as well. Is that correct?
No ketchup on hot dogs in Chicago.
No ketchup. No.
There's even a sign. There's a McDonald's next to Gene and Jude's, and they have a sign saying ketchup packets for Gene and Jude's customers, 15 cents a piece. Because people would go to Gene and Jude's, then they'd run over to McDonald's and just say, we got to get some ketchup. Which is you could tell those are not people from Chicago.
Right.
Because there's no need for any sort of condiment on a hot dog other than relish, onions, mustard, and sport peppers, which are called pepperoncini or something, I think is their actual official name.
Right.
Yeah. That's all you need. See, a Gene and Jude's is not the typical Chicago dog where they tend to drag everything through the garden. It's actually what they call a depression dog, because it was sold originally as a cheap meal during the Depression. So no tomatoes, no pickle spear, no celery salt, no other crap on there. Just a good old hot dog.
The basics.
Yeah, the basics. Many people use the Gene and Jude's hot dogs as air fresheners in their cars in the Chicago area.
Yes, they do. Oh, all right. So moving on, because we can't talk about food all day long. So let's make sure we get right into Al's beef first. Would you like to tell us about the best beef sandwich you had while you were in Chicago?
The best beef sandwich I had in Chicago was actually at the Al's Beef in Wrigleyville.
That is a good one. That is a good one. I must say, having eaten at several of them, that is probably the best one.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. Just the right amount of beef, so tender. And they actually were not out of sweet peppers like the Al's Beef on Wabash was when I went there.
Oh, were they really?
Wow. Yeah, and Al's on Wabash forgot to dip my sandwich like I asked them.
Oh, that's bad.
That's bad.
That's really bad.
And their beef wasn't as tender as the one in Wrigley.
I think the one in Wrigley, I got to say, I think they go through so much. It's so busy there because it's nonstop. The amount of foot traffic, not like the one on Wabash isn't, but not like the one in Wrigley.
Mm-hmm.
It's so busy. I used to live literally about 100 yards from there.
Yeah.
So, and it's in a nice little narrow shaped building,
corner building where a number of streets meet.
Right.
I actually have a photo of that Al's Beef.
I noticed that.
And the convergence of streets outside of it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So moving on. Again, we can't spend the whole the whole program today talking about food. So let's make sure we get right into square cut pizza before we go too much further.
Well, I was not able to get any square cut pizza on the pub crawl portion of my visit. I have a friend that I grew up. She lived right across the alley from me in Franklin Park, and she owns a place called Dino's Pizza in Lake in the Hills, Illinois.
Oh yeah, I know that place.
I had posted on my Facebook page because I went out there for a wedding that I'm in Woodstock now. If anyone wants to feed me, and she responded immediately. Come to Dino's. If you can't get a ride there, I'll come pick you up. But I did manage to get in touch with another old friend that I hadn't seen in almost 4 decades. And we made the trip to Dino's and visited with Mary Beth and caught up on old times, popcorn and pizza on Sunday nights at the Novak house. Oh. But she was kind enough to bring out a large thin crust supreme pizza.
Yes.
Which was square cut to perfection, and it was awesome. Now, I also have a picture of that on my Facebook page.
Now, Mike, I think we should quickly, I've been on another podcast where the issue of Chicago pizza came up, and certain people, well-meaning people, wanted to debate with me a bit about the merits of certain types of pizza, which are served in a pan, which are generally called deep dish pizza. And they went on to name places that make pizza that are not even deep dish pizza. They are stuffed pizza. And those are two different things. They're two different things. But let us not get too far down this road before we tell the truth about deep dish pizza. Right, Mike?
That's right. Deep dish pizza is tourist pizza.
Yes.
It's not the neighborhood pizza. It's not what we ate in the taverns and bars when we were younger men.
Right. Correct. Correct.
You get the thin crust square cut pizza. It's square cut so you could eat a piece of pizza in one hand and drink a bottle of cold old style with the other.
Exactly.
While watching the Bears on TV on Sunday.
Right. Now I will say I grew up, in addition to eating square cut pizza, just as you did, Mike, I did grow up also eating what I consider to be the only proper deep dish pizza in Chicago. And that, of course, is Lou Malnati's.
Yeah, Lou Malnati's is worth the trip. But the downtown places like Pizzeria Uno and Duo and Eduardo's and Gino's. Yeah. That's strictly for the tourists.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just wanted to make sure we cleared all that up before we got too far into this podcast about food, that we got all the important Chicago food stuff out of the way.
Well, I think we got all 3 major food groups. Oh no, one more.
There's one more. I was just about to say
12-inch Italian sub sandwich.
There we go.
Al & Joe's Deli in Franklin Park, Illinois. It's the best sandwich. Last time I was able to take some home because we drove out there. Unfortunately, with my luggage situation on a very, very small plane, I couldn't do it this time. But that was something that was a must-have. And luckily, my hotel was I made sure to book a hotel within walking distance of Al & Joe's. So that was very important to me. I had to go booking.com, which one is actually physically closest to
let me see that map. Let me just pull that map up. And
I think there was one hotel closer, but it was significantly more expensive.
Oh, okay.
But it was almost worth the difference just to be close to Al & Joe's. And I wanted a place close to transportation where I could get both to Chicago area, downtown, and also to my old hometown of Franklin Park. And it wasn't the greatest hotel in the world, but it was not bad. And interestingly enough, I had visited some friends on Sunday, and we went to the Art Institute, and they had the famous painting by Hopper, the Nighthawks painting.
Yeah.
And I was out at my hotel, in the evening, and I looked at where the lobby is, and the light and the colors were so reminiscent of the Hopper that I had to make a tribute photo to Nighthawks.
Yeah, that's an uncanny photo. It really is.
The palette is kind of reversed with the green is on the inside and the earth tones are on the outside, but the light is just it had to be done.
No, I mean, you nailed that. I think quite a few people, including me, when we first saw the picture, was like, "Oh, whoa, it's like Nighthawks."
Yeah, and I had thought about it before the visit to the Art Institute, but after I got home, it was just like, it's right there, right in front of me, And I put on the Nikkor PC 85 millimeter f2 lens on my Sony A7 II, and took a picture and just some minor editing for color, and I added some noise to make it not quite as sharp as it would be natively, and I'm really overjoyed with the way that one came out.
Yeah, it's a nice shot.
Yeah, I'd love to see it on Cinestill.
It's my on-the-fly Cinestill emulation.
Well, okay. I think we really have covered all the food now.
Oh, you can't spell gastronomy without gas.
That's right.
And speaking of gas, you did come equipped. You've already mentioned that you were, small plane, limited baggage, but you managed to really pack in a fine assortment of equipment to bring here to Chicago. And I thought it might be good to talk about the cameras, and we're going to talk about some other specific topics, but I thought it might be cool to hear about, because one of the things we talked about recently was, travel, packing for a trip, and you want to bring all your toys, and you can't bring all of them. So could you tell us what you brought on your trip to Chicago in terms of camera lens stuff, and how you felt it all worked out for you?
Okay, as you might have noticed, I traveled on a very, very small plane. There's no room for overhead luggage. You can only check one bag and one small bag to carry on. So, I had to make some choices. I bought a medium-sized camera bag from B&H Photo, I think a rugged 45 Commando. And in that bag, I managed to fit in the Sony A7 with the 24 to 240 millimeter OSS lens, the FV35/2.8, a Zeiss Icon Super Iconta A, the Canon VL, for which I packed the 11 o'clock nickel Elmar, the Sony 85 millimeter that I mentioned, the 50 millimeter Canon f1.2, and I also brought an Elmar 90 millimeter lens, which I didn't get a chance to use. I actually didn't even use the big zoom lens either, so that was a little bit of wasted space. And then I put a Rollei 35S, and I brought Johnny a Olympus XA4 for him to play with.
Well, you forgot the Biogon.
Oh yeah, and the Biogon lens, yes.
Yeah.
Can't forget the Biogon. I did the bean with the Biogon.
Yeah, and it looks great. It looks really great. Now, the thing that was really interesting to me, Mike, was looking at all of the different types of shots that you took. I don't want to say there's one that really stands out, but what I would say that what really stands out for me is the fantastic quality of the shots from the Rollei 35. Now, I'm not surprised by that, because that camera, it's a great camera. It does a great job, and it's legendary for that, right? But I guess I'm just always surprised when I see shots out of that camera, just how damn good they are. And you would think, Mike, you can't take good pictures with a scale focus camera.
That's
right?
What people seem to try to tell me. They say it'd be a great camera if only had a rangefinder on it.
No, we should maybe talk about the difference between scale focus and rangefinder, and why that Rollei 35 is such a terrible camera, because it doesn't have a rangefinder, right?
That's it really sucks. I every time I post photos from the from the Rollei 35, no matter if they're nice, good, perfectly sharp photos, someone says, well, it'll be a damn fine camera with a rangefinder. And then someone else will post a picture of their Rollei 35 with a watt meter stuck upside down on the bottom of it. And it's like, I just feel like punching them. It's like, people seem to have forgotten in the age of autofocus and bokeh and close-up pictures of flowers, what an important focusing tool depth of focus was. And how you can use it to really, I get more hits with the scale focus cameras lately than I do with a rangefinder or an SLR. The only one that I really never miss with are the TLRs. Yeah. Because I take like 5 minutes to set up each shot. But for a street shooter, out where you just want to have something always ready to shoot, nothing beats scale focus. Yeah. You set it to hyperfocal distance for whatever aperture you're using, and you just point and shoot.
Yeah. Now maybe we could talk just a little bit, take a little bit of a dive into this, Mike, on the technical side. Because I'm not even sure that everybody knows exactly what scale focus is, or zone focus, or however you want to talk about it. And also about hyperfocal, focusing and how that works, and how you're able to accomplish getting sharp pictures on a camera that doesn't have a way for you to see through the viewfinder exactly the point of focus, right? Maybe we could talk about that just briefly for people that haven't done it or aren't familiar with it.
The biggest thing is, don't worry too much about the exact point of focus, because you want your camera, you want to set your camera to be able to use the maximum depth of field for your selected aperture, and use the shutter to control exposure. The sweet spot I find with the Rollei and with the other scale focus cameras that I use on an average sunny day is either f8 or f11. So I'll set the aperture to f11. I will set the shutter corresponding to the light needed to make the exposure, and then I line up the infinity symbol on the focus with the selected aperture on the depth of field scale, and that maximizes the focus range, depth range for that particular aperture. You could cheat one way or the other. It's really not going to matter so much. And, for general shooting, that's fine. You get every shot in focus, and, you get a little closer in, you just nudge the focus a little bit closer, you don't have to worry about further out because you're already catching everything to infinity, right. In low light, you're going to have to use a wider aperture, but the same rule applies. You want your subject to be just within the range, the largest range of focus for that particular aperture. Yeah. And,
now, I was going to say, Mike, do you have like distances in mind when you're doing this type of focus? Do you have like ranges of, okay, well, that's about 6 feet, that's about 15 feet, that's about,
I don't even really think about it that much. Yeah. Because I know if I'm anywhere, I think it with the Rollei, if you're anywhere at F8 or F11, F11, I think anywhere between like 6 feet and infinity, you're going to be in focus. And, I do this with the rangefinder too, with the Biogun. The shots I took of the bean, those were scale focused. F11, I think I was at F11 on that. And with the infinity lined up with F11. And you look at them, you're not going to find a much sharper picture. Yeah. So there's really not that much mystery. I think, people forget that, all the great war photographers before the advent of autofocus lenses, they weren't sitting there fiddling around getting the focus perfect. They were scale focusing because they were in a fast moving situation where they wanted to get the shot, and the press photographers with their speed graphics, it was F8 and B there. That's what that means is you have the camera set to shoot at its widest range of focus.
Yeah.
And it's really not that hard. I don't know why people are so scared of it. I think some of the best shots I got all summer were with a Zeiss Icon Cantina 2A, and it's got a 3-element Novakian lens, so it's almost a great lens. But and set for hyperfocus and just to walk around the block. Well, I was, I had to meet a friend, and I was going to give him some film to try. But the pictures came out way, way better than I expected.
Wow.
So I've been enjoying using scale focus, either with a scale focus camera, a viewfinder camera, or with the rangefinder. It's kind of the way I prefer to shoot now. I haven't put a 50 millimeter on the rangefinder hardly at all. I did when I shot some photos at my niece's wedding, and I used the 50 a lot, but that's because I knew I needed critical focus, on the face and the eyes. But for street shooting, even if you misfocus a little bit with film, it don't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
It still looks good, doesn't
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the issue is, though, isn't it? If you do want to use it for selective focus,
then you don't use a scale focus camera.
Exactly, but I think
that's what everyone's mindset now seems to be. Well, I want to be able to get good, perfect shots close up with blurry out of focus. Well, then don't use a Rollei 35.
But exactly,
pick up your SLR.
But that's
and
but that's the whole point that people are making. I mean, interesting enough, when I attempted to do those street shots the other week, and I talked about it last week with the Leica. The scale focus was exactly what I did. I did not use the rangefinder quite deliberately. I went in there with the attitude just to frame and shoot, and the shots that I've seen so far, which I haven't shared any, but they're as grainy as actually they need to go.
That's because you got that cheap film from Eric, and you don't have his magic voodoo for getting the perfect exposure and development with them.
Exactly. I need
you need to hang around more in the vintage film shooters group and pick up some tips and development.
I think I need to post them, do a block posting the beautiful grainy mush.
Some people embrace the grain,
Exactly. I like grain when I want it, not when I don't. But I will actually spam the group in one go. I think with those, but they were all scale focused. But the point though about the scale focused camera versus rangefinder. I mean, I had a Rollei 35 very, very recently. I bought it to sell, and that was exactly what I did. And it was a lovely camera, but I was there thinking exactly the same thing. And I don't think I don't think you should have a go at people for wishing it was a rangefinder, because we all want cameras that can do as many things for us as possible, rather than a camera that you've got to, you're encouraged to use in a very specific way, because that's what
street shooting is a very specific style of shooting in most cases.
Oh, definitely. And I agree with you. What you're saying there for street shooting, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that camera. But but the other side, there were shots that I took that week. I mean, there's a shot of my son I took in a restaurant in very low light. That I was able to pull the shot off. Well, I haven't seen it yet, but I know that I just wouldn't have even attempted that shot with a scale focus camera. And
I would.
Okay.
Practice makes perfect. But if I'm going out and I want to do street portraiture or something, then I will grab the rangefinder with the 50 millimeter lens or an SLR. But I'm finding that in my town, the best light is early in the morning, and that's when there are no people on the street. So that's when I, it's easier to just grab the scale focus and not worry about looking for portrait. Although when I do run into people, I still get successful people portraits with it too. So,
well, 3.5, you've got a reasonable depth of field to play with anyway, including with the scale. So it's only really when you're either forced into using a very wide aperture, or you're just trying to get that look as where you're going to need it. In which case, you're not going to get a camera that
well. You're not going to try to pound a nail with a screwdriver either, though.
No, and I think that's the point. I think the camera is really good for what it is, and
it fits in your pocket, so you could carry your other camera in your hands or around your neck. So that's and the same thing with the Olympus XA. Some people prefer the XA2 or XA3 more than the XA rangefinder, just because of the simpleness and where you could grab it out of your pocket and make the shot. Yeah. See, I like the rangefinder one better. So,
well, that's always been a one I've never quite understood, because I think the XA2 and 4, I think, are the ones that seem to be the get the most love, it seems. And I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with scale focusing an XA? Just because it's
got the little red dot right there on the focus scale where you just line it up with, and you're at hyperfocus.
Exactly, and the throw of that, the focus throw, is tiny.
See, I don't have a problem with focusing it, though. I don't think it's tiny, and you have to find one with a good clear rangefinder patch.
No, sorry, otherwise I wasn't criticizing. I was just saying that the actual throw between infinity to minimum focus is. There's not much to it.
It's minuscule.
So it's very easy just to set it to 8 feet or whatever it is in meters and so on, and be done with it. And you've got that control of the aperture as well. So it just seems like a very I think I've got one, and I think next time I use it, I'm more likely to use it as a scale focus camera than I would do
the XA2 and XA3. They're the evolution of the Trip 35. It's a camera used to. In most cases, it was designed for using as snapshots.
Yeah.
Which is what makes it such an effective street camera, too. Because you don't have to worry too much about settings or fiddling with focus or anything. There's basically 3 zones. See, that's a zone focus camera rather than a scale focus. It's got 3 preset zones on it.
Right.
For, like close up, for head and shoulder pairs, basically. And then for infinity and longer shots.
I'm glad you just made that distinction, actually, because I've often thought that I knew the difference between zone focus and scale focus, but there's very little in it. It's just literally how that information is presented.
A scale focus camera, you can still focus through the complete range of focus. From whatever the minimum focal distance on the camera is to infinity. But with a zone focus camera, it'll usually just have like three or four zone settings where there's an actual click stop in most cases for each one, which is nice for when you don't have to really look at it. You just feel it click, click, click,
Yeah.
It's that thing about taking choices away from you, just making it easier to concentrate on what you're doing.
Yeah. Like one of my favorite cameras to shoot is actually the Kodak Signet 50, which is it's more of a scale focus than a zone focus, and it's got a really nice 4-element Ectonar lens. I think it's a 4-element lens. Lightweight body, you could tell it was mass produced, but it was mass produced particularly with Kodachrome film in mind.
Mm.
So, you're not really people didn't want blurry vacation slides. So they made a camera that was simple to use, wasn't expensive, that they could take on vacation and buy lots of their Kodachrome film with you and take beautiful slides that would amaze their friends. And that was basically Kodak's marketing strategy from the 50s onward until when they stopped making cameras, was build a cheap camera with a good lens that's easy to use for people so you could sell film to them. But, you could buy one on eBay for like $10 and, who cares if you drop it in the ocean or something? It's a $10 camera, but man, it takes wonderful pictures.
I'm just sitting here listening, thinking I kind of agree with all of you on this. Because the camera, like, I zone focus a lot and scale focus a lot, rather, when I'm shooting with a rangefinder. But what I will typically do is I'll set it on the scale and then either back off by one stop on the scale, or I will sort of check the distance on the floor where I think my subjects are likely to be. And if that distance is like further out than my focus point on the scale, then I'll just put it there, right?
Yeah,
because,
it's once you get the basics down, then it all comes down to intuition. Same as everything, same as Sunny 16. You got to know when to nudge it a little bit.
It's funny because on Sunny 16, or even in artificial light, when I was out shooting with my M4 recently with Cinestill, I had this I have this Voigtlander meter on top, but it got to a point where I was like, you know what, screw it. Like, I know that I'm gonna put my shutter at 160 because I don't want to go below that, and I'm pretty sure that if I'm at f2 or f2.8, I'm good here, and I don't really care about like mashing the button on the meter to see how close I am. But I think like on stuff like the Rollei 35, I feel the same way as Simon, or with the Olympus X8. Like, I have the rangefinder version because there's just part of me likes that better than the scale focus one. But then if I take a lens like the Voigtlander 15mm super wide Heliar, if I put that lens on one of my rangefinders, like, I get irritated by the fact that there's no rangefinder coupling. But then if I put that lens, the exact same lens on my Bessa L, I'm totally fine shooting it with scale focus. I don't care at all. And it's almost like having those extra focusing tools, or just anything extra on your camera. If you don't use it, it's annoying, right? Which is why like self timers are annoying on some cameras. Which is why Sony digital cameras like, I have an A7R2 and it drives me nuts because there's only like 2 buttons that I ever press on it, and then there's like 2,000 other ones that are just sitting there wasting space, and I feel like I'm an idiot for not pressing them.
Well, you use what you need. Yeah. The only time I ever use the self timer is on my Sony A7 II when I use it to digitize negatives. I'll set it for a 2-second because because I don't have a remote release for it. Yeah. So by the time 2 seconds is up, hopefully the camera stops shaking from when I press the shutter button on my copy stand.
That's what I use it for too. Yeah. But the 35S, I mean, like, it's so sweet, but I've been more tempted to get the LTM version of that lens, which costs way more for the simple. I mean, it's a beautiful built lens, but for the same simple reason that, like, oh, this is rangefinder coupled, so I can focus more accurately with it, even though it's such a nice lens.
Well, here's the thing about scale focus or viewfinder cameras. It gives you the opportunity to use a classic lens on a camera that doesn't cost an arm and a leg in most cases, except for like the Rollei 35, and it's the same quality lens that they put on the interchangeable cameras in many cases. We got that sonar on there, and the triplets are good, and the Kodak lenses are all very good. And there's some lots of good fixed lens, classic lens cameras.
I was just gonna say, Mike, do we want to? It's a natural segue between the two. Did you want to talk about some of the fixed lens classics that you are your favorites?
Sure. Well, obviously, Rolleiflex comes immediately to mind. Most of them, the more affordable ones, will have the Tessar or the Xenar lens, which are they're really, really good lenses. I think Simon might agree with me that the Tessar is more suited to medium format in most cases than the 35mm.
I've recently had an epiphany on that one, or at least that's the company line, at least anyway. That I now like Tessars. Tessars are great wherever they are. So please continue.
But then you get to the 2.8 and 3.5 alphabet cameras, F, E, D, with the planar or the Schneider Xenatar lenses, and I think the Xenatar f2.8 lens on the 2.8E is among the best lenses ever put on a medium format camera. As far as sharpness and image rendition goes, it's a fantastic lens. There's not a lot of difference between it and the planar, but if you're pixel peeping, the Xenotar is notably the sharper of the two, especially on the edges. But then, you go back even further, Kodak had a long affiliation with Schneider, with the Xenar and the Xenon lenses on some of their small fixed lens cameras. I guess the Retina is kind of a semi-fixed lens camera in its later implementations, but it's still the same kind. Most people just leave the 50 on there, and that's all they ever have for it. But the Kodak lenses, even the ones branded Kodak Anastigmat Special, and even the Ektars they're all evolutions of the Schneider Xenar and Xenon lenses.
Hey, Mike, I got a question for you on that. 'Cause I love this topic. Is there, the Rodenstock Heligon lenses that you find on some of the Kodak cameras as well?
Mm-hmm.
I have an Agfa Carat 36 with a Rodenstock Heligon lens on it, and it's like one of my favorite fixed lens camera lenses. Is that based on the Xenon? Are they very similar?
I think it's more closer to a Heliar though, and the same as the Agfa Soligon lens. I think those are two very similar lenses. Those were the two top lenses that Agfa put on the Carat.
Right.
The Heliogon they're not too common here in the United States. That seem to be more popular in the in Europe. But the Soligon, which is a Heliar clone, is probably the best lens ever made by Agfa. And if you could find an Agfa Super Silet or an Ansco Super Memar, or the Agfa Carat with the Soligon lens, I would recommend that you snatch that up.
Because the Heligon version tends to get touted as a little better, or tends to go for a bit more than the Soligon.
I think that might be a little Eurocentrism there.
Yeah. Because the Apitar is that's a somewhat weaker lens, but I have one of
Apitar that's a Tessar clone. I believe.
I have a Isolet 3 with a Apitar lens on it. That's one of my favorite range.
And then the Agnar lens is a triplet.
Okay, so I didn't know that the Heligon was a Heliar based design, because that explains it, because I love Heliar lenses.
Because I think it's a 5-element design, I think.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah. It's gorgeous, man. It's so nice. When that camera, I wrote an article on this camera for Hamish a while ago. But when the shutter started sticking on me, I was so tempted to rip the lens out and modify it, but I couldn't do it. So I sent it to the shop, and the guy cleaned it up for me.
I have an Agfa Carat 36 with the Soligon, which is currently in the hands of Mike Ekman, because he said he would repair it for me because the shutter wasn't firing. But I'm looking forward to that, because the Super Memar with the Soligon is hands down my favorite fixed lens rangefinder.
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple camera. It's got a beautiful bright viewfinder. Rangefinder patch is crisp, and that Soligon lens, it's the equal to the Ultron on the Vitessa, I think.
I mean, the only thing you got to be careful about with some of these cameras is, I think, the fastest shutter speed, because it just uses this enormous spring to cock the 500th of a second. So that'll bust a lot. But there's a guy in Hong Kong who I've seen. He has a bunch of these lenses that he has modified from some of these fixed lens cameras. And some of the results are just mind blowing, which is what's made me want to do it. One of Johnny's favorite cameras, the Kodak Bantam Special. That lens, when it's modified to M mount, it sells for 3 times as much as the camera here in Hong Kong.
Yeah. That lens it's basically a Schneider Xenon.
Yeah.
It evolved from originally Kodak was using the what they call the Anastigmat Special on their I think it was first came out the 5-6 element version anyway on the Kodak Duo 620, which was the very first 6 by 4.5 format camera ever made. And then later they that one, it was labeled Schneider Kruznak Xenon, I think, but or Xenar, one of the two. But then they put it on the same lens is on the Kodak Regent folding rangefinder, where they call it the Anastigmat Special, which is basically the same lens that they later put on the Bantam.
I thought the lens on the Bantam was the 47mm Ektar.
Ektar is Kodak's trade name.
Yeah.
Which they originally used Anastigmat.
Yeah.
And then people were saying Anastigmat.
Right.
And there's a little bit of negative connotation after the war, maybe with branding the lenses Schneider, which I think was the actual manufacturer.
Yeah, gotcha.
At least early on, so they put their own name first, Anastigmat Special, which is kind of a mouthful, but Kodak loved calling lenses Anastigmat, even when technically some of them probably weren't Anastigmat lenses.
Right.
But then they changed to Ektar for their top end. Well, there was, what was it, commercial Ektar?
Yeah.
Ektar.
Ektanars.
Ektanar were basically the 4-element lenses, I believe.
Yeah.
More of a Tessar clone.
Yeah.
That's where we're at with Kodak. And then they stopped making cameras.
Yeah.
Well, first they put plastic lenses on them, and then they stopped making them.
Yeah.
But an interesting fixed lens camera with a huge variety of lens and shutter combinations are the Wirgin Edixa and Edixa cameras. They're beautiful little. Well, Edixa I think was a rangefinder. The Edixa's beautiful little viewfinder cameras with lenses anywhere from a simple triplet up to the Schneider Xenon.
Those are nice looking cameras.
Yeah, and they're fun cameras. It's simple. It's almost like a updating of the Kodak 35 and the way the film advance works and stuff like that. And I always wonder what Wirgin would have become if not for that whole nasty business during the war with the Wirgin brothers and the Nazis.
Mm.
And then basically stealing his factory and calling him ADOX.
Wait! I don't know anything about the history of the Wirgin company.
Yeah, I would recommend, rather than me giving wrong information, is search Mike Ekman's site for any review he's done on a Wirgin camera, and he goes into quite some detail on the Wirgin history. Rumor has it is that after the war, Henry Wirgin was able to reacquire his factory and trade for several cartons of cigarettes. But he was such an innovative guy, and Heinz Waaske, who designed the Rollei 35, was the original. He was the designer of many of the really innovative Wirgin designs. Like the Wirgin Edixa Reflex SLR, the original one, which I think is the most beautiful SLR camera ever made. But that was, a Heinz Waaske design. But, him and Henry Wirgin kind of parted company because Waaske wanted to go towards miniaturization. And he actually designed a prototype of what later became the Rollei 35 for Wirgin before moving over to Rollei and making history with that and out my tanny or however you say it. Because I think that's the best miniature camera ever made, is the Rollei 35. But that's just one man's opinion.
All right, so on the topic of fixed lens cameras, and this question is to you, Mike, but it's kind of to everyone as well. So adapting the lenses from fixed lens cameras opens up an entire world. I think most people who are like in the photography of classic lenses Facebook group are buying like old SLR lenses or rangefinder lenses and buying adapters. But when you get a helicoid and then you attach these old fixed lens cameras onto them, it just opens up an entire world of possibilities, right? So the question I have for you guys, because I love doing this, is when it comes to ripping the lens off a perfectly good camera in order to adapt it to a digital camera, what's your take on that? Is it evil? The ethics of it?
I have two. I'm of two minds on this. One, the first is it's your camera. your property. Do whatever the heck you want to do with it. The other point is there's so many broken ones available.
Yeah.
Why take the option away from yourself of having a usable fixed lens camera that you might want to play with later to put it on a helicoid for, a lens that you might use once every 2, 3, 4 weeks or months.
Yep.
It's the same thing as people turning cameras into lamps. If you go to eBay and you search vintage cameras, you're going to come up with hundreds of thousands of hits, and it's your money. It's your camera. It's, use it for what you bought it for. If you bought it for to take the lens off, like Johnny did with his Bantam special, buy the camera, take the lens off, have at it. You want to use it to produce photographs with. And if you're not using it in its native state, then, you bought it, you own it.
Okay. I think it's always appropriate to rip the lens off a Bantam special, by the way.
I'm not going to rip the lens off mine. I'm probably never going to use it either, though. So,
and you can use the outer shell to make a very nice purse.
I could use it as a case for my pills and medication.
There you go. Yeah,
for when I travel.
So the natural follow-up to that is, for everyone, of the lenses that you have ripped off fixed lens cameras and adapted to digital, are there any that stick out as particularly pleasing in their results?
Well, I have done none of them, so I have really no opinion. The one that I would like to try most, I think, is the lens from the Nikon L35AF.
Oh, okay.
Which seems like a fantastic little lens, and there's so many broken ones out there that you might as well, if I was going to do a lens, that would be the first one I would try.
There's a guy here selling one of those housed in an LTM body, not rangefinder coupled, but still. Yeah. That's cool.
Because, reading the history of that lens is fascinating reading.
Yeah. Because, there are some lenses like the Lomo T40, is it T43 or whatever the hell it's called?
That could be a tank.
The 40 millimeter f4 Lomo thing that have become kind of almost cult lenses because people are ripping them off and rehousing them. I think the Helios 33 gets
that seems like the best use for a Holga lens anyway. So
no, fair enough.
I'm gonna get hate mail from Gutterman now.
I've got to say, I really like what Mike's been doing with his Holga.
Yeah, he does some good stuff. It's not the normal Lomo light leaks stuff. He actually makes good photographs with it.
Yeah, well, to the point where he's actually making me think that it might be worth actually trying one of these things out. But so the thought of actually using a camera that almost deliberately takes low quality photographs, it doesn't appeal to me, even though I love to put lenses onto a digital camera, which I know are not going to produce high image quality.
Plenty of low quality images with cameras with good lenses on them. I don't really need to buy a cheap one.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, I think he's got some great shots with that, and I think he's actually doing with that what a lot of people that enjoy using their compromised lenses on digital do, but he's doing it with film.
I think there's like two schools on that. There's the people who just love the camera, the light leaks, and there are people who actually want to make serious photographs with them. They're two perfectly valid reasons for using a camera like a Holga, but one I like a lot more than the other.
So on the topic of ripping lenses off, though, one thing that I've done which has kind of surprised me is I had an old Super Iconta 4, which was just dead beyond all imagination. Mm-hmm. So I ripped the lens off, which is a Zeiss Tessar. 75 millimeter 3.5, I think. And I stuck it onto a helicoid and mounted it on my Sony. And then I also took the viewing lens out of.
I think it's an 80 millimeter lens. Wait, it depends on. Was it an Iconta A or B or C?
Super Iconta 4.
Okay, I think that's a 6x6.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be the 80 millimeter tester, I believe.
Okay, hold on. I have it in front of me right now. It's a 75 millimeter 3.5. Okay. I mean, it came with a couple of different lenses you could get with it.
Yeah.
So, and then I had a old Chinese TLR made by Seagull break down on me.
Oh.
Because they break. That's what they do. And I ripped the viewing lens out of that because ripping the taking lens is a pain in the butt. And it's a 80 millimeter, I think 2.8. So I put them next to each other and I tested them. And the viewing lens on the Seagull gave me like significantly better results than the Tessar.
Yeah, that's a triplet lens, isn't it? On the Seagull,
I have no idea what the viewing lens is because
I think it's a Chinese clone of the Kamioka Trilauser.
Wait, you don't sound surprised at all that I was always under the impression
I like the TLR triplet lenses. They're great lenses. The Triotar on the early Rollei cords is fantastic. I think I love the way it does portraits. Most people say it's sharp if you step it down a little bit, but I love it wide open on portraits because you get nice and sharp in the middle and the best swirl ever in the back.
Do you know if the because I always assumed that like the viewing lens on a TLR was just a crappy lens, and then they saved their money for putting the real lens on the taking
I think lens. On some of the cameras, like the picnic TLRs, it's the same lens on both because it was a cheap lens to start with. On the Rolleiflex, they're different formulas on the viewing and taking lenses. I think most of the viewing lenses are triplets. They're the what does Rollei call them? Hydisomat or something
like that.
And they put the good lenses on the bottom.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I was really surprised when I compared those two, especially because there's no iris in the viewing lens either. So shot wide open, it's I think a slightly wider aperture as well. But yeah, it's sharper, it's richer colors than the Tessar.
Mm-hmm.
Weird.
I was going to say the iris is one of the issues you're going to get, though, isn't it? If you are taking a lens from a fixed lens camera.
Most people shoot wide open on their converted lenses anyway, right?
Well, yeah, very true. But it's still nice to actually have an aperture, isn't it?
The iris is okay. The trickier part is when you've got a synchro comper shutter and you've got to pry the shutter blades open. Because a lot of the times, if it's like a folding camera, right, and you rip the lens off, the aperture control is going to come with it. Whereas if it's a leaf shutter, you've got to find some way to, like, you've either got to take it apart and remove the blades or force them open, or do it.
Shutter with T setting on it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I've done. I've put it on bulb and then just like taped down the shutter.
Actually, I've seen some shots. I think it's a while now, but certainly in the earlier days of the Classic Lenses Facebook group, there were a few lenses that were taken, and they were using the shutter mechanism effectively as the aperture. And I don't think. I'm pretty sure they probably did have a separate aperture, but they were using.
Well, not all of them did though.
Ah, right.
A lot of them had the shutter aperture combination.
Right, and that was then giving, certainly if they were being used, and then there was like a minimum focus distance that was being used, and there were some highlights in the background, you were then getting the shape, maybe three blades, and a very rounded blade. So you get some really quite odd shaped. You don't get balls at all. You just get these triangular.
Yeah, I know. If you use the lens, say from a Yashica CC, it's got the shutter aperture, and it kind of makes a triangle. I don't know if anyone's converted those or not. I know that the DX 45 millimeter lenses from the Electro 35 seem popular as conversions.
Yeah.
I never actually found out whether or not that lens is just exactly the same as the rangefinder version. or not, which was it's a great lens on the not rangefinder, is the SLR, because that's a lens we've spoken about many times on the show as well. It's a bit of a favorite of ours, the Yashinon 50mm f2.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I have a suspicion that if it's not the same, it's very similar. The focal length is slightly different, but I
just realised it's on the Ashicas, I think, that we're talking about. That's actually a 1.7, isn't it?
Well, there's a 1.7 and a 1.2 and a 1.4, or not a 1.2, a 2.
F2, yeah.
F2, which I actually prefer the F2 lens over the 1.7. But I'm weird sometimes. I just think it renders. I think it renders beautifully. I kind of wish that had been the winner in the cheap lens contest, but everyone went for the.
Yeah, I wanted that one too, because this.
Well, you could buy one yourself, Barry.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Actually, buy one that's attached to an FX3. Well, no, that's a CY camera. The ML50 1.50.2 is another good lens, but you could buy the F2 DX lens fairly cheap because everyone wants the faster ones. But I've called it I've likened it to the Cinnamon, and I think with good reason. I think it renders the out of focus area in much the same way. It's not a bubble bokeh or a swirly bokeh camera. It's nice, smooth, creamy, classic out of focus area.
Yeah. So while we're on the subject of UFTA, real quick, we have the UFTA man here with us. So I think we should just speak about that briefly, because I think it was Jason, member of the Canon P Army.
Jason Kolodny.
Yes,
Konopinski.
Yes, member of the Canon P Army. He mentioned something about enjoying Simon and me and the gang here all saying the word UFTA, thinking that it was like a polka thing, No,
it's a kind of a northern Midwestern Norwegian or Swedish slang term, and it's an explanation. When something is something that you find strange or something, like UFTA. Actually, it's what my late mother-in-law used to say when she tried to get up out of the chair. But it's like when you see a nice looking girl, the men up there in Minnesota, they go UFTA, or when you got a really good plate of lutefisk. Yeah. It's like, man, UFTA, I can't wait to dig into that.
Not that we're going to talk more about food or anything.
We've hijacked the term for better use, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Except the Swedes up in Minnesota are saying, "What the hell are they talking about down there?"
Hey, Mike. On a number of episodes ago, we had an email from someone asking about Zuno lenses, and I think Simon mentioned that you have one of those Waltz TLRs with the Zuno lens on it.
Yes, I do.
How is that?
I haven't been able to shoot it because it has the it uses the same focus mechanism as the Minolta TLRs, which tend to freeze up. And I don't want to try to fix it myself, and I haven't been able to find anyone, even the guy who repairs Minolta cameras, who wants to attempt to repair it.
Gotcha.
And it makes me sad because the camera is otherwise beautiful, but unless I want to shoot everything at 12 feet, then I can't really use it.
That would be a pretty fun photo challenge.
I might actually try sometime because the lenses are beautiful and I want to see what they do. I've never actually seen any examples of photos taken with the camera because I think everyone who buys one just puts it on the shelf.
Yeah, you're the only person I know who has one.
There's also what is it? The Helma 44 that has the Zuno lenses.
Yeah,
which is expensive even in terrible shape. But, you know, rarity speaks for itself, I suppose.
Mike, I know another topic that you had wanted to touch on was getting outside of your comfort zone. And I know that we've talked about this in recent programs. We had Simon talking about his horizon. And I mean, you know, some wonderful things can happen when you get outside your comfort zone. And I just want to make note of something that a listener noted to me, and we're talking about Lucas Frazee.
Lucas does not mince words, generally.
No, Lucas does not mince words, and he said, "I'm so happy Simon is having fun with his horizon. He sounds genuinely happy." And I said to him, "I've never heard him talk about a camera with more enjoyment. He almost sounds American." Lucas says, "Right? He sounds so un-English and happy to be alive. None of that quiet desperation English thing." So wonderful things can happen when you get outside your comfort zone.
Yes, they do. I mean, I did some of that on my recent visit with you in Chicago. You know, I tried things that I really don't do here around town. You know, with adjusting my exposure index, I suppose you call it, in development times, and trying to get my photos to render in different ways. You know, high contrast stuff, and also shooting in kind of your style, I think, on a couple of them, and also in like Eric Sluis, he likes to shoot the slower films and overexpose them and make everything really bright. And you know, I did some of that at a wedding, and then I had actually never shot low light with pushed film before. And I think I had some success with it on our pub crawl.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it gives you a fresh perspective. And you know, I will take some of that back here with me, you know, and because I have a kind of a limited area to shoot in, you know, but if I keep it fresh with using different techniques and different exposures, I think I could continue to bring fresh results. That was an experience. I'm really happy with the way the shots in the bar came out.
You know, Mike, I was looking at those. I was like, because here's the funny thing is we had essentially the same setup. I had a Canon P with a 51.2 LTM shooting Tri-X at 800. So we're shooting the exact same lens with the exact same film, essentially. And I'm really hoping mine turn out half as good as yours.
I wasn't metering or anything. I was just saying, this is probably right.
That's what I did too. Yeah. I was at about 1.4 thinking, I can handhold it at a 30th or a 15th of a second. No problem.
Yeah. And even in the development process, you know, I processed I shot the Kodak at 800, and I also shot some of the Rollei Retro 400 at 800. Yeah. And on the Rollei Retro 800, I just processed. I tried to minimize my inversions and keep them like gentle, which I think helped with the keeping the blacks black and the grays gray and the whites white. And I think that roll turned out wonderfully.
I mean, you know, not because it looks hopefully exactly like how I like my stuff to look, but I thought it looked wonderful too.
Yeah, the Kodak came out a little bit on the grainy side and some of that. Yeah, some of the blacks, not unpleasing. Yeah, I like grain. You know, that's why I have my beautiful grainy mush Facebook group.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a good, you know, it's Tri-X grain, man. It's beautiful, right? Yeah, so it is beautiful. I do the same thing when I develop stuff at 800, and honestly I shoot 800 almost all the time, even on the bright sunny day on the street, because I throw filters on there and then knocks it back to, you know, 200 or whatever. But I develop very, very gently in Rodinal, and it really, the grain, it's dramatically different if you develop very gently at normal times. It really changes the whole look of the photo, I think.
You know, that was the first time I shot the Rollei Retro 400, so I really have no comparison of my own work to judge it with. But I mean, those were absolutely beautiful. I mean, the Accutans when you do it the slow inversion.
Yeah.
And minimal, I think it increases greatly.
Yeah. I agree.
I just want to say something about shooting outside of the comfort zone, because there was that hugely positive experience that Lucas has mentioned there with the Horizon, shooting a fixed camera, although it's a sweeping camera, with an ultra wide angle lens, or actually it's not an ultra wide angle lens, it's a 28mm lens that swings, giving you a panorama, and I love that, and it was a great experience, and I've already repeated it, and I will continue to repeat it because it's just awesome fun. Whereas the other part of my recent experience of shooting outside my comfort zone was, using a rangefinder and trying to shoot street photography, and I don't know,
and it just might not be your thing.
Well, exactly.
But now you know.
And I think that's the point I want to make. I think there's a lot of people, especially on podcasts and various other blogs and things like that, where you get encouraged to shoot outside of your comfort zone and enjoy yourself, and and it will help awake you to some other type of photography that you might spur you on.
Well, even if you don't continue to shoot like street, you can take some of what you have learned from your street technique and use it in your more general photography. Everything, you broaden your horizons in anything that you do new.
Exactly, and I think that's the sort of the point I'm making. Really, is that if you I think it's good to try. I think that's the important thing about going out of your comfort zone. Do try to do it, but if you find you actually get there and you're still not comfortable, you're still not happy with it, don't feel too bad that it just hasn't worked out.
Then you try the next new thing.
Yeah,
and especially when you find yourself shooting the same things, you have to try different things. Otherwise, you're shooting the same picture over and over and over again.
Well, that was one of the things that when we had Ed Noble on a couple of weeks ago, and I think I made the point at the time, he has found a way with his bokeh panorama shots, and to a degree also with his infrared shooting, but the bokeh panoramas are probably a little bit more accessible, especially if you've got access and the ability to do stitching photos together. His bokeh panoramas can make extraordinary pictures in very mundane places. So if you are bored of the same old shots, you can actually take your photographs in a completely different way, and all of a sudden it opens things up for you.
You make the ordinary extraordinary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny listening to you guys talk about this, because like the last few weeks I've been struggling with trying to get out of my comfort zone as well, but in a very, very different way.
Well, I think if you shoot with a lens that costs less than $300, you'll be outside your comfort zone, Barry.
No. Okay. Touche. That Konica has not been that inspiring. I will admit.
See.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to force myself to get out there and like shoot on the front lines of some of these protests, but I don't want to get tear gassed.
See, I think the pancake lens is kind of a boutique lens. I mean, it's more for its unusualness of the lens itself than for any of the characteristics that it renders in.
Yeah, but I think. Sorry, go on, Johnny.
I was going to say, though, I think that would be the perfect use for that lens, is just is like the protest stuff, street stuff, where you're stopped down and you're just shooting fast. It is really.
But that's what the Biogun is for, though.
Right. Yeah, that's true too. But why take your expensive Biogun out and get it screwed up, right?
Yeah, I'm not as concerned. Like, my concern about going out and shooting the stuff isn't that my stuff's going to get broken,
right?
Which it might. Although, I mean, hey, if we're going to give the lens away to a listener.
You probably don't want to break it.
Tear gassed and dyed blue first.
Covered in pepper spray and just blue dye.
There's your lens, some super glue in a Brillo pad.
Call it a special repaint edition.
Just run it through the dishwasher before you send it out.
No more need for a blue filter.
No.
Or a soft focus filter. Soft blue Konica.
No, I think my problem with that lens is the fact that I'm shooting it on the Sony.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't enjoy shooting SLRs, period, except for like portraits or longer lenses where I'm picking out a subject and that's it. And then on the Sony, it's like it's the perfect size for a lens on the Sony, but I just find it so uninspiring, But at the same time, if I put any similar lens on the Sony, I find it equally uninspiring.
Well, the lucky winner of that lens is going to be saying, "Oh, yeah, thanks."
So Perry, the solution here is obvious. You need to go buy an original Konica auto reflex full/half frame camera, and you'll put that 40 on there, and it's perfect. And I can trust me because I'm looking at my combo right now. That camera and that lens together, and it just makes me happy even looking at it. So
yeah, because when I take the lens off the camera and I play with it and fondle it, I like it a lot.
Can I just play with it till like
it's a fondling lens?
No, I think if I can find a cheap Fuji adapter, I think if I stick it on my Fuji, I'll enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, it should go good.
Have it converted to like a M.
Oh my god!
Well, I think on that note, I think we should start to wind things down a little bit now. Thanks, Mike, for
it's been fun.
Your vast knowledge of food. And,
we haven't even touched on beer yet.
No, we didn't even go there. No, we didn't even go there.
Another time. Let's just do a bit of housekeeping. First one being, I just want to thank those people that have donated to us in the past week, which are Barry Carr and Nigel Cliff. And Nigel has also left us a message with his donation saying, "Don't spend it all on M2 winders." Well, I've already got one. It's in fact it's the only reason I'm keeping the camera, it seems, so I can just wind it on. So if anybody else wants to help us along, you can just go to www.coffee, ko-fi.com, and just search classic lenses, or you find the link in the show notes, and you can help us out. So very appreciated for those people that have donated to us. So there's that. Johnny, have you got any shout outs this week or anything like that?
I don't think I do, actually. No, I don't think so. Other than, I kind of did a shout out last week to the Novakian photo walk folks. So I would, we actually have Mike here today. So my shout out is really to Mike himself.
Hey, Johnny.
So I'm really glad you made it into town, Mike, and it was great to hang out with you in person finally. Fun. Yeah, that was a cool night. So I'm really glad you were able to make it in, and hopefully it will be a regular feature that you'll do this every year, or you stop by and do a Novakian photo walk in Chicago.
Looking forward to it.
Excellent.
And I've just realised that we do actually have an email, but we'll save that one for next time. So Perry, any shout outs from you?
No shout outs from me.
Okay. And I haven't got any other to say. Come along on a Tuesday night if you want to do some developing, printing or things like that, or just chat about old lenses and cameras and things at the Six Towns Darkroom in Stoke-on-Trent. That's every Tuesday evening. If you want to know more, just drop me a line via the many places that you can get in touch with me. Okay, so let's.
I have shout outs.
I do apologize, Mike.
Yeah, and I'd like to give a shout out to my partners in crime on the photo walk / pub crawl, Jose Luis Uribe, the lovely Sonia Milian, and Eric Reese. We had a great time. It was great meeting new friends and people I've known just online.
Yeah.
I mean, and I also want to say the high point of my trip to Chicago, besides the photos and the food and everything, was just the diversity of the city. Everyone should visit Chicago. It was, riding the Blue Line and hearing people speaking 5 different languages in all colors. It's just not something I see every day anymore.
Mm.
So the shout out to the city of Chicago and the people of the city of Chicago.
Absolutely. And
all right.
Mike, where are the other places that people can keep up with all the things that you do?
I can be found on both Flickr and Instagram as Grayscale 3. I do have a blog, but it's completely devoid of content, so there's no use going there.
Was Grayscale 1 and 2 taken?
I suppose, and that's Grayscale with an E. I posted a link to my Flickr album of the photo walk pub crawl in the podcast chat here. Johnny wants to add it to the show notes.
What possessed you to spell gray properly?
Because I think it just looks cooler when you write it. It was Greystoke, the Legend of Tarzan. It wasn't Greystoke.
No, Greystoke is where Simon lives.
Yeah,
it's
most days, but
yeah, it's very grey at the moment. That's for certain. Yeah. Okay, Mike. Once again, thank you for being with us. I'm glad we've actually given you an opportunity to talk in a way that people can listen to you this time as well. So it's been great to have you on.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. Right. So Perry, how can people keep up with the things that you do?
You can find me on Instagram, Flickr, and the internet at Perry G. Perryge.
Okay, and Johnny?
Not to be confused with pierogi.
No, it's very different. Although if you poke them, they feel kind of the same.
Yeah.
You can keep up with me at Sisson Photography on Instagram, and you can meet me in person at Central Camera Company in Chicago most days of the week. And take it from Mike Novak, that actually works.
Mm-hmm.
Did that last
He
week.
actually sold stuff to me.
I did actually, yes.
Okay, and how about things like how people get in touch with us and stuff like that?
Right. You can send us an email at classiclensespodcast@gmail.com. You can contact us also through the podcast website, which is classiclensespodcast.com. And of course, make sure that you follow along on Instagram with Best Vintage Lens. Friend of the show, Best Vintage Lens. More friend than enemy. And they do the great write-up of the show, each show, that's better than the show itself. So make sure you check that out.
And there's also another way that people can listen to the show as well, isn't there?
That's right. You can also go over to YouTube. And you can, I guess, watch a blank screen with words that go across it that may or may not be the words that we're actually saying when we're talking. So you can do that too. So you go on over to YouTube and see what that looks like.
That's the Classic Lenses podcast channel on YouTube.
On YouTube,
it's stunningly successful as well.
I still need to check this out.
Yeah, I mean, last week's show. We're now 5 views as we talk.
All right,
5 people on. But YouTube is the future, of course. So there you go. It's not a very bright future if that's the case. Okay, so as for me, I'm on Twitter as Simon4. I'm on Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic. I'm still doing nothing on Flickr. I think it's about nearly a year since I've put anything on there. I think that's what it looks like, at least anyway. What else? I've got my website, which is Simon Forster Photographic. There are a few lenses on there as well, including a very nice Carl Zeiss ZM Biogon and a 100mm f2 Contax Yashica lens on there as well. They're also on my YouTube channel, on my what's the other place? eBay. Yeah, that's it.
eBay.
But strangely enough, you get a better deal if you go to my page. But yeah, there you go.
Hey Simon, where did you get those lenses?
They came from a very reputable seller in Hong Kong. They've got blue paint on them.
The blue paint special.
Exactly. Yeah. Fortunately, I got rid of the blue paint. So, well, there you go. That's pretty much it. Sorry, go.
Just put it in a bag with a Gene and Jude's hot dog. It'll put the paint on.
And some ketchup from McDonald's next door.
No ketchup.
Okay, so that's it. Our music for the show was by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. It's called Octo Blues. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's show. And if you can, be like Carl.
Mike is having audio difficulties.
Oh.
Hello. Mike, can you hear us?
Perhaps if we shout really loud, can you hear us, Mike? Perhaps that might help.
Maybe he walked too far away from his
microphone
computer with his microphone. Yeah.
Move closer to the microphone, Mike.
He says he can't hear us.
Ah.
Maybe he needs to I'm not sure what kind of mic he has, but you know what I'm saying. He might have if he walked away with it on his head.
Oh,
he may need to
reconnect,
essentially.
Yeah.
There you go, Perry. Bluetooth. That's what we were talking about. Bluetooth.
It was a case of Perry, you write something.
Perry here to save the day as usual.
That's what the millennial is here for.
Exactly.
Got an Asian guy on the podcast to do your tech support for you. I see how it is. I'm gonna type something.
I think I'm back.
Hey,
there he is.
Welcome.
Did I miss anything?
No.
Okay. You're all talking about me. You conspiring bitches.
Perry was schooling us in us old guys with his proper use of terminology when we say, well, maybe the thing isn't working because of that other thing when Mike walked away.
It was my dude biggie.
Yeah.
It was unwaffled.
Right. Well, let's talk about today's show.
All right. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast. Tell us about your best meal in Chicago.
Oh, my best meal was the very first Italian beef.
Mike, stop.
Yes?
Stop. This is not the podcast. We haven't started the podcast.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to tell Johnny about my meal,
Well, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. If that's where the podcast, because I'm going to hand over to Johnny largely anyway.
All right. Well, it's going to be a gastronomic blowout, man.
Well,
so
What I'm thinking is we're pretty much going to rerun the last podcast that you're on, except we're not going to have Em and Hamish come along, because ultimately we didn't really get to hear that much of you for two reasons. One, because Em and Hamish stole the show, and two, your mic was
that was my porn name.
yeah.
Mike
Yeah.